This is Ms. Forte, and welcome to Technique Tuesday. Today we're going to talk about how your vocal folds work and what we call head and chest voice, which we've all kind of heard how we get through our break, the passaggio, blah, blah, blah. All these different things, what we call it. But we're going to talk about the musculature, how our voice works as a muscle, and why we have that break. Why is there a difference? What's happening there? So the best way that I've ever seen this described or shown is just using your hands and putting your hands together like this. And you're going to go from the pinky all the way up to the top and make that happen. So we want to think about our vocal folds are thick, as well as they have thickness, as well as length. So when we are doing our full vocal fold closure, and I must put a shout out here. This explanation is from Matt Edwards at the CCM Institute at Shenandoah University. And seriously, it's the best thing I've ever seen. So I want to think about when I'm in my chest voice or my full voice that I'm having a full vocal fold closure. Everything is closing. Okay, so that would be kind of what sounds like just like your basic. I feel like there should be a fan in front of my face that I can make noises in the fan. Nobody else does that? Really? Okay. So yeah, that you're going to have this full vocal fold closure. And then when we go up into our high voice, so you want to think about like a Minnie Mouse kind of, hi, everything's great, yay, up in this light, airy, kind of different things. But basically what's happening is we're only using part of our vocal folds. They actually shift position and elongate a little bit, and then only close the top so that it can vibrate faster. Going back to our guitar analogy, right? We talked about how our voice is like a stringed instrument. So when we think about a guitar, the top string on a guitar is an E string, right? And it vibrates at a pitch, at a speed that creates an E. Well, if you go to the bottom of that guitar, you're going to find another E string, but it's 2 octaves higher. And the only difference between the strings is the size of the string. So the top one, the thick one, can only vibrate at a certain speed. It can't reach, even though it is E, it can't reach that high because it just can't vibrate while it's that thick. So in order for you to get at that higher of a pitch, they had to make a smaller string. So basically, our voice does that. It like changes itself into thick and thin so that it can reach a larger range of pitches. So what's happening when we hear this break happening is that our vocal folds are changing configuration, and usually they do it like all at one time. So you get this and it just kind of changes, right? So what we want to do is clearly the whole goal is to smooth that out a little bit. What we want to think about is that eventually I want to get to the point where I'm just using a little bit less chest voice, a little bit less, and then eventually I'm doing this. Then, of course, being able to bring it back down and slightly adding and slightly adding and slightly adding until I'm back to the beginning. But that takes a little bit of practice, and that's not really what we're going for here. What I want to do is just even cover the basics of how do I use and build muscle in both of those voices. Because what we want to think about is we're actually using 2 different muscles to make that happen. So when you're in your full voice, it's your thyroid muscle, or TA muscle, because good Lord, I don't want to have to say that again. Your TA muscle is what's being used the most. When you're in your head voice and your vocal cords have elongated out, what's being used or working the hardest is your cricothyroid muscle. Cricoarytenoid muscle. And so what we want to think about is I have to work out those muscles. Just like I have to work out my arms, if I only work out my biceps, only the front side's going to get strong or stronger. And what happens is then when I go and I try and lift that same weight this way and my triceps are the one that's working harder, it's not going to work so well and I'm going to drop it. So the same thing is what happens when we try and sing up in our head voice. And so many people all the time are talking about, man, my head voice is just so weak. I've got this great strong chest voice, but then I just try and sing up there and nothing comes out, or it's super breathy, or all of those different things. And none of that is what we want, right? We want it to be able to be a little bit more even. So what we want to do is really build that and think about building it as a muscle. Just like when I go to the gym, I'm going to work arms one day, I'm going to work legs, I'm going to work these different muscle groups, but I need to keep them balanced. I need to think about balancing them out. So especially when it comes to our voice, a lot of times we don't realize, well, most of us speak in chest voice. We're using that muscle all the time. So that's a lot of times why it's so much easier or so much stronger. Not only is it fuller just because there's more there, but because we're using it a lot more. So you want to think about, I need to work on my head voice. Even those of you who really want to go and I want to be a big belter and I want to build up my chest voice. Well, if you don't build up your head voice as well, you're just going to have a super different break when you get up there, because at some point the thing cannot vibrate that fast at this thickness. It's going, if you want to be able to expand your range and hit higher notes, it's going to have to change that configuration at some point. So you want to be able to make sure that both of those are strong. And I kind of think about it like, in order, before we start working on bridging the gap, I want to make the gap a little smaller. So I want to make, my chest voice is super strong up here and it's all great. My head voice is way down here. That's a huge gap to make that difference. I want to make sure that I'm building my head voice up. That gap's not so big to bridge. I can make that happen a little bit easier. So make sure that when you're warming up, you're always warming up the full extent of your range. Don't just work your little belt range, or don't just work your little head voice range. Make sure that you're using both of those things and you're really starting to build that. Think about it like a muscle, because that's what it is. So I hope that helps and that explanation helps. We'll get a little bit more in depth on how to actually do that in the next few weeks.